There are 15 fruits your grandparents grew and loved and ate by the bucketful, and you have most likely never tasted a single one of them. Picture a September evening up on the ridge, the air gone soft and sweet, and a heavy green fruit dropping down into the leaf litter with a thud. Inside it is the color of custard, and it tastes of banana and mango and melon, all folded together. That one is coming last, friend, because it is the finest fruit this whole country ever forgot, but it is only one of 15. 15 fruits that filled the yards and the fence rows and the canning shelves of the people who raised you and then dropped clean out of the world you were handed. You did not lose them. They were taken off the table while your back was turned, and I am going to walk you through every one. For about 100 years now, you have been told that the fruit in the store is the fruit that exists. Apples, bananas, oranges, grapes, a strawberry that tastes of water. That is the whole menu, and you have made your peace with it. But here is the honest truth of it, and I will only say it the once. Your great-grandparents did not eat from a store. They ate from the land around the house. A dooryard back then held a pawpaw patch, a mulberry tree by the gate, currants along the fence, a persimmon out past the barn. Dozens of fruits, each with its own season, its own flavor, its own use. Then the trucks came, and the grocery chains, and somebody in an office chose a small handful of fruits that could ride 1,000 miles in a boxcar and still look pretty on a shelf. The rest were left behind. Not because they tasted worse, because they bruised, or they would not ship, or they ripened all in 1 week. It was not a conspiracy, friend. It was just money, just how a market works when it gets big enough. And so the fruits our grandmothers named for us slipped off the shelf, out of the yards, and out of memory, somewhere back in the middle of the last century. My name is Amos, and for 60 years I have dug roots and gathered wild fruit up in these mountain hollows, the same plants my grandmother named for me before I could read. I am retired now. I have nothing to sell you and no reason to tell you anything but the plain truth of what I have seen with my own 2 hands. Real quick before we start, most folks who watch this channel are not subscribed. If you like the old fruits our grandparents grew that vanished from the stores, go ahead and hit subscribe. It is free and it helps an old root man keep making these. Alright, let us count them down together, from 15 down to number 1, and we begin with number 15. Number 15 is the maypop, and most folks walk right past it without a clue what they are looking at. It is our own native passion flower, and it grows wild across the south and up into these hills, throwing out a bloom so strange and lovely that the first settlers thought it a gift straight from Scripture, purple and white, fringed like something from a far country, and it belongs right here. After the flower comes the fruit, an egg-shaped green pod that pops when you step on it, which is how it got the name. Inside is a sweet tart pulp that tastes of guava and citrus mixed together. Your great-grandmother made maypop jelly from it, and sipped a tea of the leaves at night to calm her nerves and sleep. It vanished because nobody could ship a fruit that bursts at a touch. Here is what you do. This summer, when you see that wild purple bloom along a fence line, mark the spot and come back in the fall. But the maypop is only the beginning, and the next one grows on a bush your grandmother likely had by her back door. Number 14 is the Nanking cherry, and it may be the toughest little fruit you will ever meet. It is a hardy bush, not a tree, and it will shrug off a winter that kills half of what is around it. In spring it foams over with pink and white blossom, and by early summer it is loaded so heavy with small, bright red cherries that the branches bow down to you. They are sweet with a tart little bite, and the old folks turned them into jam, into pie, and into a deep red homemade wine that came out at Christmas. It faded away because the cherries are soft, and they do not keep, so no store would touch them. But a Nanking cherry bush is cheap and near impossible to kill. This season, plant one along your fence, and inside 2 years it will feed you and every bird in the county. Now the next fruit was called a date, though it never once saw a desert. Number 13 is the jujube, the red date, sometimes called the Chinese date, and it has fed and healed people for thousands of years. On the tree it is a small crisp fruit that eats like a sweet apple, and when it dries down it turns chewy and rich like a true date. Grandparents who grew it prized it 2 ways at once, fresh off the branch in the fall and dried in a jar for the whole winter through. In the old healing traditions it stood for long life, and folks brewed it into a tonic for a tired body and a worn-down spirit. It slipped away here because most Americans simply forgot it was ours to grow, and it grew rare. A jujube tree asks almost nothing of you and bears in poor dry soil where other fruit gives up. Seek one out from a nursery this year and put it in the worst corner of your yard. But if you want a fruit that tastes of the tropics off a tree in your own yard, wait for the next one. Number 12 is the loquat, and folks who grew up down south remember it well. Some called it the Japanese plum. It is an evergreen tree that does a curious thing. It blooms in the dead of winter and hands you golden orange fruit in the early spring when nothing else is ready. The fruit is sweet and a little tart, juicy as a plum, with a flavor between an apricot and a citrus. Grandmothers cooked it down into jams and compotes and canned it in syrup to hold that first taste of spring. It left the stores because a ripe loquat bruises if you look at it hard, and it will not survive a long haul. If you live where the winters are mild, plant a loquat and you will have fresh fruit before your neighbors have a single bloom. And the next fruit is one that doctors are only now catching up to. Number 11 is the aronia, the chokeberry, and it earned that hard name honestly because a raw one will pucker your whole face, but do not let that turn you away. This tough native shrub grows a deep purple blackberry that holds more of the good antioxidants than nearly any fruit going, which is why the health folks are rushing back to it now. Your ancestors were not fools about the sour. They cooked it down with a little honey into jams, syrups, and a dark wine, and the sweetening turned that pucker into something rich and deep. It got left behind because one raw taste sends most people running, and no store wants a berry with a reputation. Here is your move. Plant an aronia bush and never eat it raw off the branch. Always cook it first, and whatever you do, do not judge a fruit by one raw bite, because the next one on our list proves that very point. Number 10 is the buffalo berry, a silver-leafed prairie native that fed this land long before any of us got here. The indigenous peoples of the plains gathered these small red berries by the basketful, and the settlers who followed learned from them fast. They are sweet and tart at once, and they make a jam and a bright syrup that folks once spooned over wild game and over their morning bread. It thrives on the open prairie where the wind never stops and the soil is poor, asking for nothing. It vanished from our tables because farming plowed the prairies under and nobody thought to bring the wild bush along. If you are out west, plant one and reclaim a taste this continent has known for centuries. But the next fruit was the pride of the family garden, in yard after yard before it up and disappeared. Number 9 is the gooseberry, and there was a time no proper garden was without one. It is a tart green berry, sometimes streaked red, that grows on a thorny little bush that will outlive you. Grandmothers baked it into pies, boiled it into a tangy jelly, and cooked it into chutneys to eat alongside the Sunday meat. Picking it was a whole family affair, children and grown folks working the bush together on a summer evening. So why did it go? The answer has nothing to do with the taste, which is bright and wonderful. It has everything to do with the law. Back in the early part of the last century, this country banned growing gooseberries and currants across whole regions because the bushes could carry a disease that harmed the pine timber the lumbermen wanted. A generation grew up never knowing them. Plant a gooseberry now, for the ban is long lifted, and that same law struck down the very next fruit as well. Number 8 is the currant, red and black and white, and it was the jewel of the old world kitchen brought over to this one. Small, glossy, tart and sweet, hanging in little strings like beads. The red made a jelly so clear and bright it looked like stained glass. The black was cooked into jams and cordials and a syrup for the winter cough, for it carries more vitamin C than an orange. Every immigrant grandmother from the old country grew them, and they fell to that same federal ban I just told you of, pulled up by the thousands to protect the timber trade. It was money, plain and simple, the lumber dollar beating out the fruit on the family table. The ban has eased now in most places. Find a black currant plant this year and taste what your great-grandparents lost. But the next fruit is one so beautiful the old orchards called it a jewel outright. Number 7 is the quince, the golden jewel of the old orchard, and it was a symbol of prosperity and love in the yards of the well-to-do. It is a knobby golden fruit shaped like a lumpy pear, and here is its secret: you cannot eat it raw, for it is hard and sour and no good at all off the tree. But cook it, and it works a small miracle. It turns a deep rose pink and fills the whole kitchen with a perfume like honey and flowers, and it sets into a jam and a jelly firmer than any other because it is loaded with natural pectin. Every fine home once had a quince tree. It left us because the modern world lost all patience for a fruit you have to cook to enjoy. Plant one, and this fall cook your first quince and watch it blush pink in the pot. And if you think a fruit you must ripen with patience is odd, wait until you hear number 6. Number 6 is the medlar, and this one is the strangest fruit on our whole list. It is an old world fruit, brown and round, and you do not eat it when it is ripe. You eat it when it looks nearly rotten. You must let it soften and brown for weeks after picking, a process the old folks called bledding, until the hard flesh turns soft and sweet like a spiced apple butter with a note of date. This was a treasured winter delicacy, brought out when the fresh fruit was long gone, and it is said to have graced the tables of medieval kings and queens as a fine finish to a feast. It vanished for the plainest reason of all. A modern shopper sees a soft brown fruit and thinks it spoiled, and walks on by, but it is at its very best right then. Seek out a medlar tree, and learn the lost art of bledding. And speaking of fruits with a season so short you must know exactly when to move, the next one gave the old-timers only days. Number 5 is the mayhaw, and gathering it is a piece of the old South almost nobody remembers. It is the fruit of a hawthorn that grows down in the swampy bottoms and the bayous, and it ripens for only a week or two in the spring. The old way to harvest was to go out at first light in a small boat and gather the ruby-red berries as they floated on the still black water. From them comes mayhaw jelly, a bright, tart, ruby-colored jelly that folks down there will tell you is the finest jelly God ever allowed a person to make. It vanished from the wider world because the harvest is so short and so wild that no business could ever bottle enough. If you are in the deep South, find a jar of real mayhaw jelly this spring and taste a lost morning on the water. But the next fruit did not hide in a swamp. It grew right by the front door of nearly every home in America. Number 4 is the mulberry, and if you are past a certain age you may remember the tree and the purple stains it left on every child's bare feet. Grandparents planted mulberries close to the house and along the roads on purpose because the tree bears heavy and asks for nothing in return. The berries are long and dark and sweet, honey-sweet and jammy, and they went into pies, into jams, and into cordials, and what the family did not eat, the hogs and the chickens grew fat on. There was even a time this country planted mulberries by the acre to feed silkworms and start a silk trade. So why did it disappear from the stores? Because a ripe mulberry crushes the instant you touch it and stains everything it meets, and there is no way on earth to ship that. Find a mulberry tree in your town this summer, and I promise it is closer than you think. And the next fruit was known to the old-timers as the sugar plum. Number 3 is the American persimmon, and mark me well, this is our own native fruit, not the firm orange kind flown in from across the ocean that you see in the store. This is the wild persimmon of these hills, and there is one hard rule you must never forget. Bite it before it is dead ripe, and it will dry your mouth to leather and pucker you so fierce you will spit and holler, but let the frost touch it, and let it grow soft and wrinkled and near falling, and it turns as sweet as honey, sweet enough, the old folks called it the sugar plum. From that ripe pulp came the great persimmon puddings of autumn, dark and rich and spiced, a dish that meant fall had truly arrived. It faded because it will not ripen off the tree on a store's schedule, and the unripe fruit is a cruel trick on the tongue. This fall, find a wild persimmon after the first frost and taste our native candy. But whatever you do, do not eat one green, and do not think we are done, because the next 2 are the sweetest of all. Number 2 is the serviceberry, also called the Juneberry or the Saskatoon, and it is summer's first real gift. Long before your blackberries or your blueberries are anywhere near ready, this tree hands you clusters of soft purple berries that taste like a blueberry crossed with sweet almond and a touch of cherry. It grows wild across nearly the whole country, and it carries a load of the same good antioxidants everyone chases now. Grandparents ate it fresh by the handful and cooked the rest down into a jam and a pie that beat any store berry going. In the mountains they knew it by another name, for it bloomed just when the ground thawed enough to bury the winter's dead and the traveling preacher could finally get through to hold the service. That is where the name serviceberry comes from. It slipped away because the birds strip a tree in a day and the fruit will not keep, so no store could ever stock it. Plant a serviceberry and beat the birds to summer's first berry. And now, friend, we come to it, the one I promised you at the very start. Number 1 is the pawpaw, the finest fruit America ever forgot, and it has been hiding in plain sight in our own woods the whole time. Folks called it the poor man's banana, the Kentucky banana, the American custard apple. It is the largest edible fruit native to this entire continent, larger than anything else these woods produce on their own, and almost no living American has ever tasted one. The flesh is a soft golden custard, and it tastes, I swear it to you, of banana and mango and melon whipped together into something you would sell your boots for. This is not some foreign import. The Native Americans grew it and spread it up the river valleys long before any settler came. When Lewis and Clark ran low on food on their journey home in 1806, it was wild pawpaws that carried the whole company through. Thomas Jefferson himself grew them at Monticello and shipped the seeds across the sea to France. This was a founding fruit of America. So how on earth did it disappear? For the same reason as all the rest, only worse. A ripe pawpaw lasts but 2 or 3 days before it turns, and it bruises if you breathe on it. There is no shipping it, no shelf for it, no chain that can sell it. So the greatest fruit we ever had was left to fall in the woods and be forgotten, not because it failed us, but because it could not be turned into a product. And that is the whole secret of this list laid bare. You never tried these fruits because the store never carried them, not because you missed something, and not because they were ever any good. It was never on you. Here is your one true task, the cheapest ticket back to everything your grandparents knew. This fall, find a pawpaw at a mountain farmer's market or a roadside stand, or better yet, plant one heirloom tree in your own yard this season. Taste that custard, banana and mango and melon in a fruit off American ground, and you will understand in one bite everything that was taken from your table. Because that is what this really is, friend. It was never only about fruit. Every one of these was a piece of a life where a family fed itself from the ground it stood on, where the yard and the fence row and the woods gave more than any store ever could. That knowledge did not fail. It was set aside because it could not be sold back to you at a markup. But a seed does not forget, and neither do you, not anymore. When you plant one of these trees, you are not just growing a fruit. You are taking back a small piece of your own independence, a thread that ties you straight to the hands that raised you. A person with a pawpaw tree and a persimmon and a row of currants is a person the trucks cannot fully shut off. That is not nostalgia. That is sovereignty, growing in your own yard. So do me 2 kindnesses down in the comments. Tell me first which of these 15 fruits you remember from a grandparent's yard or table, and second, which single one you are going to go and plant or hunt down this year. I read every one of these I can, and the memories you share never cease to move me. Thank you for spending this while with me and for caring about the old ways enough to sit through it. Look after yourselves and come walk the woods with me again. And next time, I am going to show you the forgotten backyard nut trees that once fed whole families through the hardest winters, including one native tree so prized its wood was worth more than the crop, and it is very likely standing in the woods behind your house right now.